What does it mean when you give up your genetic code? Did everyone read the fine print for 23andMe? Are you giving the rights away? All I'm telling you is I don't think that's a good idea. But what you can know for sure is the word RH factor comes from the rhesus macaque. So the RH is lifted from the rhesus macaque monkey. It is claimed that originally it was discovered that a rhesus macaque had antigens on the blood cells, making it RH positive. 85 to 90% of the world is RH positive.
Friends, before we begin, just a quick thank you to this interview's sponsor, the new Patriot Brother X 2020 flashlight. One of the best things you can invest in for your home protection is a Patriot Brother flashlight. You'll never waste money on batteries again because the Patriot Brother flashlight is solar powered. It lights up the darkness with 800 lumens. There's a life-saving emergency strobe and 4 more unique lighting modes. And you can even charge your phone anywhere with the USB port. Other features include compass, magnet, rope and wire cutter, solar powered recharging, high and low beam LED modes, and an extended glass breaking hammer. This tactical flashlight is lightweight and durable. The holidays are fast approaching, and Patriot Flashlight wants to extend a 25% Patriot discount to all customers throughout the month of November for Black Friday. So take advantage of the discount right now and give someone you love the new Patriot Brother X 2020 flashlight. The link is below this video. All right, friends. Sean from SGT Report here. Thanks so much for tuning in. And I have back on the line my friend Crow 777. Boy, Crow and I tend to go into some pretty woo-woo areas sometimes, and I wonder if we'll get there again in this call. Crow, welcome back.
Hey, man, thanks so much. I know you're kind of on the edge of a cold. I'll do what I can to help hold things up.
Yeah, you offered to do some heavy lifting in this conversation, which I appreciate. And you know what? Maybe a good way to frame up our conversation is to talk about the plot against humanity to call the population. Look no further than the Georgia Guidestones, right? Let's keep humanity in perpetual balance with nature at a global population of 500 million. You didn't say it, I didn't say it, they said it. They're the ones that put it on their granite stones in Georgia. Meanwhile, we've got UN Agenda 2030 barreling down the tracks.
What everyone needs to clearly understand is what is occurring. What is occurring is a restriction of all resource consumption above what is needed to supply vital human needs. And that restriction is saying anything above vital human needs is immoral, and that the human population must be reduced, because they claim in the climate action plans usage must be reduced to 1750. This is back in the 1700s, where we did not use equipment or machinery to drop the greenhouse gas emissions effectively so that we can prevent the weather from changing. These are global agendas adopted globally everywhere.
They want to take away all our current forms of energy in the name of saving the planet. I think it's all diabolical, and I think it is a depopulation plan, Crow.
When you see things like the Georgia Guidestones, it's pretty creepy, because if you look at them carefully, it's in a number of language. First off, who does that? There is a stone or a hole in one of the stones that points to solar noon every day. There's a slot cut through the top that marks the ecliptic. How many groups in the modern age could even put together something like that, design it and put together? So this is serious business. On the face of it, I don't think you could find 3 big organizations in the world that could easily track the sky in that way. And yeah, they're talking about going down to 500 million. That's a hell of a reckoning. Jason and I just put up a show today, episode 187 on crow777radio.com, that has to do with the RH factor. For people who are not familiar, everyone in the world has a factor on their blood type. It's either RH positive or RH negative. This is some of the most obscured research. We've gone at this twice, found endless claims that this group or that group is the original human beings and everyone else is just animals. And I mean, it's ridiculous when you get into the research. But what you can know for sure is the word RH factor comes from the rhesus macaque. So the RH is lifted from the rhesus macaque monkey. It is claimed that originally it was discovered that a rhesus macaque had antigens on the blood cells, making it RH positive. 85 to 90% of the world is RH positive. Then that leaves roughly, and we're not even sure because the numbers are all over the place, something like 10% are Rh negatives. It's pretty much assumed that most of the royal families and rulers and important people in the world have been Rh negative. Quite a lot of them may be O negative. These are hard things to prove, but it's been admitted by some. So we know. Here's the rub. If you were to remove, and you see, part of the problem here is we don't know for sure what the world population is. When Jason and I did a show, we did research to try to determine how out of control is human population. What we found is that almost all cultural groups, if they don't have an increase in birth rates in the next 3 generations, they're going to be headed for extinction. I'm not even kidding. Japan being one of those things. You know, there's shows on Japan on television all the time. Travels in Japan or something. Everywhere they go, there's almost no children. This is a real thing. So we are reasonably sure that the population of the world is actually falling. The reason it looks like it's growing is because everyone has moved to city centers, so cities are populated. You can jump on a plane. As soon as you leave the city, you're flying over unpopulated area. But here's the thing. If you removed all the Rh positive people in the world, we think you'd be in the neighborhood of 500 million. Difficult thing to prove. But there's all that, man.
Nothing like jumping into the deep end of the pool.
No doubt.
That's some mind-bending stuff. And all I did was bring up the Georgia Guidestone. So you go into this entire other realm of research, which I didn't really even know too much about. I mean, I've heard that about rare blood types being associated with the elite. And we have that famous clip of Prince Charles bragging that he is related to Vlad the Impaler.
The genealogy shows that I'm descended from Vlad the Impaler, you see.
Dracula.
Yeah, literally Vlad the Impaler, one of the biggest mass murderers in the history of the world. And Prince Charles is just tickled to share that information on BBC when he was being interviewed. Meanwhile, as it relates to, I think, this topic that you're talking about just a little bit, isn't it interesting to see all of these find your ancestry companies? So we have Ancestry.com, we have 23andMe. Guess who the CEO is of 23andMe?
Who's
Ann
that?
Wojcicki, the sister of Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube.
I've known my husband, Sergey, for a number of years because he works with my sister. My sister works with him. They started the company in her garage, and they used to have this whiteboard that said Google Worldwide Headquarters. And my other sister used to love to go in and erase it.
So isn't it interesting how these people all rise to high levels of power? Well, and Q says, follow the family, follow the bloodlines.
Here's one thing that I'll mention. This whole genes thing, the genetic collection thing, came on my radar, I don't know, almost 15, maybe close to 20 years ago. It was near the year 2000. I don't remember how close. And I'm an ex-Marine, so I have the VA for my medical care. At the time, they started sending all these things out in the mail saying, all ex-military, swab your cheek and send it into us, and we'll give you better medical care in the future. And I thought, Then immediately after that, I realized National Geographic was doing it. And that's when I started to take a more careful look. It's one thing to determine your blood type. Everyone does it, whether you're A positive, A negative, whatever your blood type might be. It is entirely another thing to give up your genetic code. Now, I will not use 23andMe just so I can, stroke my ego to think I know something about my ancestors. People are claiming that what you're doing when you do that is giving up rights to your genetic code. Now, I don't know if that's true, but what I do know is it's no different than giving the blueprint of a building to someone. Now, they could use that blueprint to do something positive for the building, or they could use that blueprint to do something very negative to the building.
Right.
And in a world where things like the Georgia Guidestones sit out in the open and nobody, on those damn stones, it says put together by a few enlightened Americans or something like that. And by the way, there's a time capsule buried 66 feet below this that will be opened on this date, and the date is blank. Now, nobody's fessing up to that. Nobody's claiming ownership, and yet they got the gall to say, basically, we need to remove something like 85 or 90% of humanity, depending on what the world population actually is. And then you start to open your eyes and think about, what does it mean when you give up your genetic code? Did everyone read the fine print for 23andMe? Are you giving the rights away? What are you doing there? All I'm telling you is I don't think that's a good idea. And when you show who owns it, I really don't think it's a good idea.
Well, that's exactly what I was driving at. It's a little bit like putting all of your personal information out there on Facebook. You opt into their platform and you give away all of the goods on your life for free, right? Worse than for free because they profit from it. So the CIA couldn't do the job Facebook does. So you've got that end of the spectrum. And then you've got these heredity companies like 23andMe saying, opt in, give us your blood, give us your cheek swab, and then we'll have everything we need to know about your DNA. I mean,
Yeah, your blueprint.
your blueprint. I like your analogy here. It's like a blueprint for a building. They get everybody's blueprint, at least everybody who opts in and chooses to participate with these companies. And look, the bottom line is you don't get anything for free in this world. Okay, the elite aren't giving away anything for free. If they want that information about your DNA and your ancestry, they might want it for a reason. Take a look at what's going on in China with the practitioners of the Falun Gong being imprisoned and having their organs harvested for profit.
I always wonder about those things, Sean, because that's absolutely a violation of universal law. If there is such a thing as any kind of a karmic idea where if you do good things in the world, you're putting good into the world, that would be the exact opposite. But I use an analogy on the show we just did on blood types. Think of a place like New Orleans. Most people that go to New Orleans, whether you love it or just think it's an interesting place, it's unique, right? And there are a hell of a lot of people that love how unique that city is. What makes it unique? Well, the thing that makes it unique is diversity. And that's all there is to it. That's what makes that place unique. All the food, all the music, all the culture, all the old buildings, the diversity of all the human beings that came to that city made it what it is. And look what happened. 20 years before the fact, they started putting things on TV saying, you know, if a hurricane came barreling down just a certain way, there'd be hell to pay. Well, lo and behold, that happens. And we know a thing or two about weather manipulation these days. Hint, hint. So it gets hit just the way they said that if it ever got hit that way, there'd be hell to pay. There's other stories about how the flooding happened. My point is, no one was too concerned with coming anytime soon to help out the people who'd just been pummeled by a massive hurricane. What's that about? I can show you poems from American culture that say things like, there's only 3 cities in America, San Francisco, New Orleans, and New York, which of course isn't true, but what they're saying is these are unique places that matter to the human condition. And this is exactly what we're talking about. You go back to the Guidestones, what are the damn languages there? Is some of that in Vietnamese? No, I don't think so. Does that mean Vietnamese people got to go? And who the hell makes that decision? From my point of view, if you look at nature, there's no lie. If I love birds and one day I wake up, I say I love birds, but all the swallows got to go, guess what? I'm not right. The creator of this place, or however we got here, decided swallows played a role. So it's really no different. And not only that, when you show all the Rh positive people have a direct relationship to the natural things in our world, that's another effort. But it certainly does kind of look like we should be paying better attention. I guess is all I can say at this point.
That's an interesting area of research. Well, you're going to have to keep us posted on that. You're going to continue to dig into that further?
I'm going to maybe drop a bomb because I'm going to relate it to the biblical story of Cain and Abel. So many people, you know, do you remember the movie came out not too long ago with Russell Crowe being Noah?
Oh, I didn't watch it, but yes.
Mm-hmm. It was a terrible movie. Not only that, it didn't follow the Bible at all because one of the main characters was Tubal Cain, who does not play a major role in the way that he was portrayed. But so that's a descendant of Cain, right? Now, from the standpoint of what we're told, the line of Cain invented everything that matters in our world. Metalwork, music. I mean, there's a whole list of all the crafts that matter that came from the line of Cain. But the biblical story tells us that Cain killed his brother. And God came and said, hey, Cain, where's your brother? And Cain said, hey, God, am I my brother's keeper? And God said, hey, man, his blood is crying out from the earth. You can't hide that. And by the way, I'm throwing you out of paradise for murdering your brother. And I'm going to put this mark on you. And Cain says, but God, if you do that, someone out there will kill me. And there's, you know, people are familiar with the story. I'm beginning to wonder if that mark is the RH factor that's being alluded to in these very old tales. Jason and I just did a whole series on Greek myth because there's no new stories in this world. Those same stories that were true back then, because nature proves they're true, are the same stories that get told over and over and over. Everything you see out of Hollywood is just a reiteration with a an intention put on it when you see a movie. It's just these same stories. We showed that CNN used the baby down the well, which was basically truth down the well, to found their 24-hour news cycle. This is no different. We have this old story of Cain and Abel. And by the way, how many people are aware that Tubal Cain is encoded everywhere? In the modern dialect, it's two balls and a cane, to be blunt, and that would be two testicles and a penis. It's encoded in Google, 0 or OOL. It's encoded in the 007 character, 007. The original use of the Tubal-Cain sign is like this, the cane part is like a weird hockey stick, kind of the top of it's bent a little, almost like a 7. Wayne McCroy in the episode we just did pointed out that it's encoded in the Facebook stuff. So, this is, I think, part of the reason none of us really get classical educations anymore is because if we were aware of all those Greek myths, and if we were aware of all the biblical tales and taught from a young age, all this stuff going on in the world, we would recognize its source right out of the gate. But unfortunately, most of us came through modern education, which is an entirely different thing.
Right. Huh. Well, that's pretty thought-provoking. And I wonder if we should circle back. You mentioned, or you alluded to earlier in this interview, essentially geoengineering, right? Weather manipulation. As we consider this larger subject matter of the elite or this plan to cull the population, right? They're openly talking about it now. So whereas 10 years ago, if we would have had this conversation, it would have sounded more like a conspiracy theory. Well, now the conspiracy is in the wide open, right? The people that promote UN Agenda 2030 and the people that promote the idea of global warming is going to kill off the population, they argue that we need to reduce the population to save the planet. So what I'm driving at here is, as we consider UN Agenda 2030, right, and them wanting to take away all our current forms of energy in the name of saving the planet, let's talk a little bit about aerosol spraying. I posted a pretty important video over at the Phaser just the other day. And the title of that video, guys, is Polar Vortex Secret Disclosure, Best Science, DBAS Aerosol Spray. This comes from the HARP report on YouTube. Let me just read this. New disclosure of Pacific weather control technology that is heating the Arctic, putting California in drought, and poisoning the USA with super toxic aluminum fluoride aerosol sprays. This is must-see brand new science, which has never been public before. The newly discovered aluminum dust is extremely flammable and explains how the California fires are so explosive. Like thermite, small amounts of metallic aluminum release tremendous amounts of heat when burned. This is really a must-watch video. I'll try to remember to link it below this video, my interview here with Crow. Crow, what he drives at also in that video is the fact that this cooling now that we're seeing every single November across the Midwest, and the flooding we're seeing is just devastating farmers, and it's going to reduce the food supply. So as we move toward 2030, we're going to have food shortages, we're going to see starvation, and we're going to see all of this stuff. Meanwhile, the enemies of humanity are going to be telling us that we need to give up all our forms of energy in order to save the planet. It's an absolutely diabolical plan. And so I keep talking about UN Agenda 2030. I want it to be on people's radar because it's a diabolical plan. It's an anti-human plan.
All of it is. And it's beyond the pale. I guess you can't accept that you're living in a creation or that nature is perfect from our point of view. If you go down the roads we see in 2030 and chemtrailing, right? What you're basically saying is, I'm going to be God. I'm going to make the decisions. The only problem with that is those people can't create life. If I told one of those people to make a new species of bird, they couldn't do it from scratch. There's the difference. Nature can do that. But here's part of what's scary. From my point of view, we have a right to talk about things that concern our health and our children and our food supply. And who the hell puts rocks around saying that we need to kill 90% of the population to get down to 500 million? Who's doing that? Nobody's taken ownership. But in the RH factor research, Wayne McCroy we had on uncovered that one of the things the proteins on the RH positive blood cell do is help get rid of waste from the body. And it's claimed that the RH negative doesn't have it, and they're not quite sure how an RH negative blood cell deals with the waste. Since I started filming chemtrails way back at the end of the 90s, back when people told me I was just a nut conspiracy person, and I was trying to say, look up, look what's going on, they wouldn't listen. No one would listen. Very few people. Well, now it's all admitted, isn't it? So it doesn't matter what happened back then. But people used to always ask me, why in the hell would they spray something in the air when they have children too? And that was always a vexing question. Now we've done the RH research. Is it possible that an RH positive deals with waste in the human body differently than an RH negative? Those proteins on an RH positive have to do with the removal of waste products. And we're starting to ask these questions, not fully understanding the answers, but recognizing the possibility. And again, if there was a problem with the RH positive blood type and something happened where they all got sick or died young or couldn't have children, the Children of Men movie idea, which was recently out of Hollywood, you'd see about roughly 10% of the population left, something like that. So these are big ideas, man, and it's unfortunate that so few of us are asking the questions and trying to look carefully at what we're being presented with.
Yeah, and what really stinks about it is that we see George Soros type groups, non-governmental organizations, people who know what's going on and are helping to carry out this plan, whipsaw young people into thinking that humanity is the problem, right? So we have Greta Thunberg flying around the world, and we have all of these young people, kids in school, being indoctrinated in these public schools around the world that the planet is heating up and that we're all going to start dying off in the next 10 or 12 or 14 years or whatever their magic number is. And so we definitely need to give away all of our rights, all of our abilities to heat our homes and to drive cars in the name of saving the planet. These kids don't understand that that is inherently an evil plan, because without energy, we're serfs. Literally.
You're
Human
without
life
power
is
on the
energy.
face of it. Yeah.
Human life is energy, and human wealth is energy. Without energy, we all live in poverty. We're all serfs. And that is the plan. That is the UN Agenda 2030 plan. I've talked about this in detail with Harley Schlanger and others. It is an anti-human. Harley Schlanger goes so far as to say it's a satanic plan. And I think you said something very important. These people defile creation. And I think a great example of that is the vaccines program. So what else do they want? They want to roll out transhumanism. They want to tell us that in order to be better human beings, we need to merge with machines. That's also anti-creationism. And that's also an anti-human plan. It's anti-God, Crow.
Well, I point out all the time, most people are not aware what the literal meaning of the word sin is. And it escaped me because I grew up like everyone, accepting what I was told at Sunday school or at school. One day I was in a doctor's office and I saw written in Spanish, sin chloro, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. That means without chlorine. Sin is to be without. It's what's happened to Cain in the Cain story, right? You're busted, buddy. You killed your brother. Now you're outside of the presence of God. You're in sin. You're without. That's what we're talking about here. And to harp back to what you said, yeah, if you remove people's energy, you've removed their power. Does anyone need to understand what that means? But what's worse is they've done this in such an underhanded way as to have taken over all the communication systems that matter. So what they're saying cannot stand on its own. If it could, they wouldn't need to censor people. If we scrutinize what they do and we point it out, so many damn people catch on that they're not getting away with it. On December 10, YouTube's going to update their user agreement. There are flat out statements in the new user agreement that if you question anything the news has confirmed, you will be deplatformed. What's that about? Well, that's about hiding a lie. You see, because the truth doesn't need defense. And by the way, I would like to put a ray of light here. Some of the things we talk about, I think, make people feel helpless and down. But let me tell you something. What's going on is an attack against the natural world. If there is a creator, that's attack against that too. This creation, nature, whatever you want to assume that it is perfect from our point of view. And there's not a living human being that could even come close to making something so complex and so perfect. And yet what we see is they're burning it. They're spraying things into it. They're relying on the truths of alchemy. They know that they can trash the hell out of anywhere. And within 100 years, nature is so perfect, it will put itself back. They do things like tell us when an oil spill happens that it's destroyed nature. Well, then the oil came from nature. That's not true. It's part of nature. So while it's inconvenient for everything that has to deal with the oil, in a very short number of years or decades, it will be right back to what it ever was, because alchemy proves that water will become steam, will become clouds, will become water. And in the process, it'll purify. All these things that we know from the older ways are what they know. They can spray crap in the air. They can make it inconvenient as hell for the living things here now, but they know when they knock it off within 50 or 100 years, it'll be as it ever was, because nature is that perfect. Nonetheless, you and I are part of nature, and to remove us is not their choice. And so when we start to add up what's going on here, I would not trade where I'm sitting all day long for these supposed powerful seats they're sitting in. I wouldn't do it. It's against everything that I believe to be correct and true. It's outside of light. It is the definition of sin, and it's kind of sick to think that you can come into a world so perfect and say, guess what? I don't like this kind of monkey and that kind of beetle and this kind of earthworm, so I'm removing them from the system. Not your choice. Not your choice. Everything here has a function, and human beings are no different. And the diversity of human beings is why this place exists. So what you're looking at is a power grab that's indefensible, and they think because of legal loopholes and fooling people into opting into things that harm them is their ticket out. And I'm sorry, I don't accept any of it. And we have a right to discuss things that we think are harmful to us. And yet, the social media platforms, they're blocking our ability to do that. There will be a reckoning at some point, and who knows how this will come out, but I'll tell you all day long, we're not the ones standing in the shadow here.
You know, one thing that I definitely agree with you about is the fact that this creation is perfect. I mean, God made a world for human beings to live in, a planet for us to live on that is perfect.
It's perfect.
And these people want to own all of it, right? They want to take all of it. They already think they do own all of it. They think they own us. I guess if you go down the, what did I do to my audio? I guess if you go down the rabbit hole far enough, you'll find out that these people have secured all of us against the debt of our nation with our birth certificates. They literally think they own all of us. They want to have an internet of things where they can track and trace every single person and everything that you own in real time. Their goal. These people are literally diabolical, and their plan is diabolical. And I guess as we flush this conversation out and we wrap things up here, we'll come full circle with the idea that if you sign up for these 23andMe services or Ancestry.com and you willingly give away your information, your biological blueprint to these people, you may want to think twice. And it is interesting to me that Ann Wojcicki is the CEO of 23andMe, and her sister, Susan Wojcicki, is the CEO of YouTube. And
special family there, huh?
It's just incredible. And to your point, Crow, in the section of their new terms of service that they announced about a month ago that are coming into play here on December 10th, in the section titled Account Suspension and Termination, with the subheader Terminations by YouTube for Service Changes, the site's new terms, they say the following: YouTube may terminate your access or your Google account's access to all or part of the service if YouTube believes, in its sole discretion, that provision of the service to you is no longer commercially viable.
Here's the thing, man. It's being claimed that all the ham radio systems in California, all the repeaters are going to be taken down. Historically, we can show that ham radio operators are of huge service in any emergency, and they're stifling that. What you see here is the control of communications. And I don't think probably right now, if they went lock, stock, and barrel again like they did in 2017, I think there'd be a hell of an outcry. But you see, part of the language of that, initially YouTube defined itself as a public forum. I think they're pushing away from that. Because if you're the public forum, there's rights that go with a public forum. So I think it sounds like what they're doing back is saying, no, we're a corporation, we're here to make money. And if you're not making money, then we, it's this shell game. But at the end of the day, does a free living human being made in this perfect creation have a right to freedom of speech if they are not harming anyone? A right to freedom of thought and freedom of expression? And I'm sorry, I have my own highest moral court. No one can tell me any different. As long as I'm not harming anyone, those are my rights to the grave, and I won't surrender them. But what we're seeing here is a full frontal effort to control those things, even little areas of that agreement saying that if you challenge what the news told you is true, then you'll be deplatformed. Well, I got news for you. We've come to understand that if the news says a thing, probably the opposite is true. 2 or 3 corporations own it all. We know that Mr. Obama changed the Smith-Mundt Act. It's now legal to lie and propagandize with the news in this country. So it's obvious what's going on here, but it's indefensible. We have a right to raise our children and to expect reasonable safety and to expect to be able to afford to live and things like this. And this is exactly what's being limited. So what it comes down to is I suspect we will get what we are willing to stand up for.
Yeah, well, that's the only thing that has ever made a change in the world is people standing up. I mean, revolutions when they're necessary. And just to flush this out, Team YouTube did respond to all of the criticism of their new terms of service policy. And their response was this, quote, "To clarify, there are no new rights in our terms of service to terminate an account because it's not making money. As before, we may discontinue certain YouTube features or parts of the service, for example, if they're outdated or have low usage. This does not impact creators, viewers in any new ways," end quote. I just find that really hard to believe since they use the term not commercially viable.
I think it's the guy who sees something in the world that's wrong, is not monetized, but puts out information they're very worried about. It's that kind of thing, maybe. But
Yeah.
come on, commercially viable. Hey, do you use the new, they're trying to push us all into the new beta interface. Can you find anywhere how you find how many subs you've lost in the new beta interface?
I hate it.
I still haven't found it. So what they're doing is they're removing your ability to see how badly they're treating you. Every day I upload a video every Thursday morning. My revenue goes up 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 or 6 on a normal day, which is nowhere near what it used to be. But my subs go into negative numbers. How can those two things? I can show historically through the life of my site that's not true. And so in the old interface, there's a little setting that says, how many subs did I lose today or this month? And it shows you a graph of how many they took each day. That's going away. Or if it's not going away, I have yet to find it in the new interface. It's just things like this. It's information control. It's what it is. And so what is going on here is they're going to make the argument that things like terrorism and all the violence that gets shown on the news is the reason why we need to surrender our human rights. But there are quotes in this world that remind us all, anyone that gives away their rights for security deserves neither. And if you forget that, you're probably going to be living in a world with no rights. And I would ask one more thing. Suppose any created thing in this world will see its end. That's provable. Even a rock eventually is no longer going to be a rock. Same as the cloud, just takes a hell of a lot longer. My point here is suppose that we lose big and these crazy people who think they own everything or want to own everything get what they want. Would you want to exist in that world? And there's a shelf life on that, right? I'm just saying.
Well, we're in agreement, my friend. And I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said the only reason we resort to government at all is to protect our liberties. That is the only role of government. And obviously, governments around the world, including ours, have overreached and have broken that agreement. And the Democrats celebrate it. The leftists, the Marxists, the brainwashed students in colleges, Antifa, they literally celebrate the destruction of our liberties. And it is the most foul, distasteful, rotten, stenchful, sin-filled thing I can imagine, is that these people are so brainwashed that they can't even stand up for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. These people don't care, man. All right.
Well, I would ask a simple question before we go here, Sean.
Yeah.
Do we really have governments in the world anymore? They're corporations.
No, that's right.
You could look them up. And so then you could ask, does the Bill of Rights apply to me if I'm being ruled by a corporation? Corporation does not serve the customer, never has. Might make appearances, might try to make the customer as happy as they can. But at the end of the day, they work for 2 entities, the shareholders and the board of directors. That's who a corporation serves. And the people of the United States are neither of those things, apparently. And I would further point out, we just did some episodes with Kurt about what happens to a living being in the first 9 months of its life, and the laws that were put in place that try to claim at the moment of birth you were lost at sea. But that's another story. I just want to thank you so much for having me on, and I hope you feel better soon, bud.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. Thank you so much. And for those that want to delve a little bit further into that birth lost at sea concept, you definitely want to research Jordan Maxwell. Go on YouTube and watch some Jordan Maxwell interviews and discussions. Hey, Crow, can you shout out your radio show and tell people how they can find you?
Right. I used to shout out YouTube, but who knows if it'll be there tomorrow. I am Crow 777, CRROW 777 on YouTube, but my main game is the site that I own on my own server. It's crow777radio.com, CRROW 777 radio.com. We post the first free hour of everything there. If you want to become a member for the price of coffee, there's full shows, and that's where free speech is protected. And thank you again, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of nice just to get on, and literally had no bullet points today of anything to discuss. I mean, we could have gone with current events like Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the real quid pro quo in Ukraine, but I cover that just about every day. So it's nice to just go down a different avenue with my friend Crow. Thanks, Crow.
Right on. What's the old saying? We don't need no stinking badges.
Here's your badge. Badges? We don't need no stinking badges. Oh, no.
Anyhow, man, thanks.
All right, brother. Thank you. And friends, thank you so much for tuning in. A shout out to our patrons. Thanks for keeping us in this fight for truth. And for real news 24/7, you guys can visit us directly at sgtreport.com. God bless. Bye-bye.
It is the linchpin to all the political assassinations in this country. That's Robert Kennedy, that is Malcolm X, and that is Martin Luther King, probably John Lennon, and unquestionably, as you said before, John Kennedy Jr.